Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today in this session of Authors Live. Today, I'm talking to Mr. Kelvin Lansang, and we're discussing his poetry book, MGA HUBAD Na ANINO. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right,
That's
Kelvin.
fine.
I'm definitely hoping that you can give us better explanation about your book. So, can you please introduce yourself and your book to the audience, please?
Okay, thank you, Miss Isvi. I
Mhm.
am Kelvin Lansang. I am 32 years old. I am from Caloocan City, Metro Manila, Philippines. So I am currently working as a senior high school teacher under the Department of Education, and as well as I am taking up my PhD at the Philippine Normal University in Manila.
Oh.
I am taking my PhD in language and education, and
Mhm.
I am currently in the dilemma of writing my dissertation. So
Oh, I
hopefully.
see. Okay. And about your book, a little bit about your book.
The title of the book, Miss Isvi, is Mga
Yes.
Hubad na Anino. And Mga Hubad na Anino in English, as we translate Mga Hubad na Anino, is Naked Shadows. So
Right.
that's,
Okay.
that's the that's the translation in English. So
Okay.
the book is certainly something that is about, it's not an anthology, but rather a collection of poems. So a
Mm-hmm.
collection of narrative poems in particular. Some of the parts were written in first person view, and some were
Right.
written in narrator narrating. So
Mm.
the main idea of the book was to discuss some aspects of our lives,
Mm.
people's lives that sometimes we are not keen on discussing. So such taboo in life that we're not fond of discussing. For example, what would be the easiest way to discuss or make a discussion or argument about time travel or
Mm.
parallel universes or the multiverse, especially now
Right.
that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is on the run. Uh,
Right. Right.
about lucid dreaming, about
Mm.
abortion, or same sex relationship or marriage, incest, and the
Mm-hmm.
existence of the human soul, and many more. So I think it would be challenging for writers to expound on each idea,
Mm-hmm.
especially today when contemporary readers always want to do something or want to consume something which is instantaneous. So my poems, Miss Isby, are brief and
Mm-hmm.
personal, but each character always dives deep into the unknown mysteries of the universe that we seldom talk about in a typical form of literature. And I
Mm-hmm.
do consider too every poem inside that book, Mga Hubad na Anino, as a short stories, a
Ah,
prototype of short stories, and at the same time, scripts that were ready to made for films.
right. I think you described that perfectly, Kelvin, because I mean, obviously, I had to use Google Translate to read your poems. But this is one thing I definitely realized how, read these poems as snapshots of like certain things. So, like you mentioned, an entire short story or an entire script in a poem. And I think that's a wonderful skill. So, talking about your skill in poetry, can you give us a bit of a history about your writing? Like, how did you start writing?
Oh, my first writing. I think Miss Isvi, I realized that I have this curiosity in writing when I was in elementary way back 1997.
Mm.
So my language teacher asked our class to write a poem. So originally that was around July. So it fell under the nutrition month because July in our country is nutrition month. It
Okay.
turned out she noticed that my poem was way a bit deeper and allegorical compared to my classmates' output. So I remember she asked me in Filipino, the sentence is, "Gawa mo ba talaga ito?" So in English, "Is this really your work?" So she's a bit dubious, or she has this reservation
Mhm.
na if that poem is written by me. So then she brought me to this old sage-like character teacher, the Zen master in our school that teaches young students on how to write and
Mhm.
recite poems. I remember his name was Mr. Pascual. So God bless his soul. He asked me to write a very short verse of a poem from his chosen topic, but I didn't recall what the topic was.
Mhm.
What I did recall was, to his amazement, he asked me again to write a new poem. This
Mhm.
time about the nutrition month. For as I've told earlier, the July was our nutrition month in our country. So I can vividly recall I was 7 years old back then when I recited my first poem in front of hundreds of students in our school program. I remember this fine young lady, this young girl, she slipped a one by one ID picture of her into my pocket of my white long sleeve after I recited the poem. So yeah, I felt way back then that, oh my god, I felt like I was a rock star. Writing my own stuff at that early age was, I think, cool for the folks. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's when I realized that I want to be a writer. I want to be this certain kind of nerd type rock star, if you may, if you suppose that's the term for that.
No, I would definitely call you a rock star, Kelvin. I mean, the fact that you started writing at 7 and you've been writing in such an introspective manner since a young child. So, is this your first poetry book or have you published more?
I had published certain at the same prototype of the Manghubad na Anino,
Mm-hmm.
certain bits of that parts of the Manghubad na Anino
Mm-hmm.
in a specific publication in our country, the CCP, the Cultural Center of the Philippines. And I have many scraps and bits of poems that I've written, but I am very keen in publishing my poems because I think I'm not that good. So I suppose the word in our country is tago mo na lang yan sa banga. So just keep it inside the shelves for, I think, for the future archaeologists to
Right.
discover your works. But then some change in destiny happened, and I'm in front of you now speaking with you, Miss Ishby.
So, Kelvin, you mentioned the fact that you've already published some of these poems here and there, right? So,
Yes.
when exactly did you start collecting, this collection, like writing and then, I don't know, percolating them together and then, deciding to, publish it in a book?
I I suppose that's when I realized that I am leaning towards this specific genre that
Mm.
I am fond into. So you see, I am a fan of Edgar Allan Poe.
Ah.
So my writing is an offshoot, or we
Mm.
should we say the skeleton of the writing per se is very Edgar Allan Poe-ish.
Mhm.
And I think I do believe that he is one of the greatest writer who's ever lived. And I
Right.
owe him a lot of my identity as a writer before I publish stuffs that I publish. I do write Mish is VR dark stuff. So that's very
Mhm.
Edgar Allan Poe, very Alfred
Yeah,
Hitchcock, very
definitely inspired by, yeah.
and I do believe that we can only appreciate light if
Mhm.
we appreciate the darkness first.
Mhm.
So that's
Right.
why the title of my book is Mga Hubad na Anino, because you cannot appreciate light if you don't see the shadow, the opaqueness of the thing that
Mhm.
was hit by the light. So in my
Right.
life and writing, I think I we always tend to be optimistic, but we shy away from exposing ourselves to harsh and
Mm.
dark contexts. For we
Right.
are all fatigued, right? So Miss SB, we are all suffering. We think that our suffering was enough.
Mhm.
I write dark and narrative poems. You see, in the Philippines, when we talk about poems way back, and for now, the contemporary students or the contemporary readers will
Mhm.
always identify it as something which is associated to love and
Mm.
forms of poetry, such as the spoken poetry from the Western countries. So
Mhm.
in the Philippines, gone were the days that we appreciate narrative poems, considering that the earliest poems in our country used to be narrative poems. And I think in your
Okay.
country as well, the
Yeah.
Mahabharata and the Ramayana
Yes.
are narrative poems. Uh, our epics are such as the great canons of the Ilocos region, the northern region of the Philippines. It's like the Winterfell of the north in our country. We have these narrative poems such as the Biyag ni Lamang.
Mhm.
We have the Torante at Laura, written by our king of Tagalog poetry, which is
Mhm.
uh, who is Francisco Balagtas. So those were all narrative poems, but appreciation of such kind of poems was, I think, diminished because we today Filipinos shied away from the fantasies and anything that is associated with the medieval type of romanticism.
Right,
And
right.
in my work, I think I improvise my work under this genre, and I called it mga
Mm.
kwentong barberso. You see the mga hubad na anino, and then at the bottom there's a word mga kwentong barberso. In
Mhm.
the Philippines, we use the word kwentong barbers o kwentong barbero, or
Mhm.
a barber's tale. When a
Okay.
barber is tending his client, he often tell tales of
Mhm,
such things, which is we all know the fact that most of them are fictionalized.
mhm,
Uh, and I incorporate the word verso, which in Spanish means part of poem or a metric of a
mhm.
poem. That's
Right.
why when I fuse it together, I got the word mga kwentong barberso. So particularly my genre is narrative poetry that has dark and grim realities of life
Uh-huh.
with a fictional touch.
Right, right. I think that perfectly fits the like it could be a synopsis to your book, you know. I really like how you mentioned that you're inspired by the dark side of romanticism.
Yes.
Right. So talking about just everything you mentioned in your book, which comes from, you know, all these dark elements that people definitely dwell into, but
Yes.
might be hesitant writing down, right? So
Yes.
do these inspirations come from your own personal life as well, because you in your book you talk from the point of view of various people, right?
Yes. Uh, I think you're pertaining with the where did I get the information or the
Yeah, inspiration.
content per se, the inspiration.
Yeah.
So I think Miss HV, I think it's weird, but I write stuffs without outlines.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can say that this is a conventional scene for any writers to write anything without any outline. It's like creating a house without the blueprint of it. But sometimes a thought pop up in my head, maybe when I was in a particular place or I am watching or observing something. For example, Miss HB, one of the openers in my book, Mga Hubad na Anino, is a narrative poem titled Bartolina,
Mm-hmm.
Sinapupunan ng Tadhana, which can be translated to Bartolina, Womb of Destiny. So that's the translation. That particular story is about a young guy who went
Mm-hmm.
into a bar named Bartolina.
Mm-hmm.
And then he noticed that he was attracted to this old dancer in the club. So luckily, something sexual happened to this guy and the older dancer or the oldest dancer of the club, only to find out that the dancer is his biological mother. So
Right.
that's in Filipino we call it sarong banggi or an accidental incest that happens in our country at least 1 in 100,000 incidences. Do I immerse in that specific context so that I could get inspiration? Nope. It just so happened that I was in that club and I was
Okay.
writing bits of poems and
Mm-hmm.
I was observing the surrounding inside the vicinity or inside the establishment. The story, I don't know where the story come from. It's just part of my system, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I just let my hand write
Mm-hmm.
and incidentally, I too have no idea where my writing will take me.
Right.
So most of the time, it's like I have this eagerness to write, but I don't know what I'm going to write. And
Right.
then
Okay.
suddenly the story pops up. And then in my defense, I too need to Google it. What happened in my writing? What is that specific story? I
Mm-hmm.
don't know where it come from. So I do believe that there is a collective consciousness in
Mm-hmm.
our universe that is allowing us writers to write something that we are not fond or we are not particularly immersing with. So I think that's my answer to your question.
Right. I think I agree with you in the fact that, you know, research and inspiration kind of go hand in hand. And what I'm hearing from you is that instead of seeking inspiration, you let inspiration hit you, it seems.
Yes.
So you don't outline what you're going to write, but, you know, you might have certain plans, right, while writing poetry, because poetry, unlike, you know, writing stories or anything else, it is a bit more defined, you see. So,
Yes.
like, how do you plan out, you know, your day while, so say inspiration hit you on certain topics? So now, so what's next for you?
So in terms of planning, Miss Ishby, I again will supersede my previous statement. I think I don't have any plans when I am writing. To be
Mhm.
honest with you, I do not plan what or when to write. I
Okay.
do consider my writing as guerrilla writing. So some
Okay.
sort of such as guerrilla warfare, but guerrilla writing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I write when there's an urge to write. I usually allowed my fingers to type on the keyboard or my hand or my pen to dictate the tempo or the tone or the direction of what I am writing. And then I do believe that whenever I think about what I should write, it
Mhm.
always creates that awkward sense and it too
Mhm.
affects my productivity. So yeah, uh, you could consider that I am stubborn, a stubborn newbie in terms of planning when I am writing. But
Right.
I think that's my nature as a writer.
Right. But everyone has their own thing, right, Kelvin? Like this is
Yes,
how you
yes.
write, and someone else might outline and must be very particular about,
Yeah.
certain rules of poetry. But even though, you mentioned your writing as the guerrilla warfare writing, but what I really liked about your writing is how powerful it is. Like you mentioned that, you embrace the darkness and, convey it in your writing. But this is what the readers must feel as well, right? Because when I was reading your poetry, I realized that there are certain things that made me uncomfortable because it's something I've not really read before, right? So it made me confront darkness in my own way. So what
Yes.
kind of effect do you think your readers have when they read your poetry?
Particularly, there are bits of that book
Mm-hmm.
that was read by my previous students in high school, in senior high school, in college. They
Mm-hmm.
always have that WTF effect in their
Right.
after they have read the story. Particularly, there is a part of the book titled Mifeproston, Misoprostol,
Mm-hmm.
the last part of the book. It was about I I am watching I watch The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and
Mm-hmm.
then I have this inspiration that I want to write something which is backwards. It
Right.
turned out that when my eyes is following what I am writing, and the story was finished, I realized that I wrote something about abortion, and I
Mm-hmm.
have no specific title about it. I just wrote something which is it starts from something which it starts from the mother narrating that specific part of life with her son,
Mm-hmm.
only to find out that everything from top to bottom is
Mm-hmm.
just her imagination 2 minutes
Right.
before she induced or ingested that pill, that peprostol and misoprostol, which is psychotech in our country. So
Mm-hmm.
this is the pill that was ingested if you want to abort your baby. So and then after the students all read the part of the story, they have this oh my god effect in the ending. So I realized, this is what I want to write. This is
Mm-hmm.
this is this is where my writing belongs. And then I shied away from writing conventional stuffs that I write before or I wrote before, like formal essays and
Mm-hmm.
everything that is concerned with exposition, because I think this is my calling, or this is my color in terms of writing. I have this dark approach in writing, and darkness uh darkness creates a mobility inside the mind of the students that had read my work, and
Right.
they asked me after that, what is my preface on Miss Opus, sir? I want to know what is this. So
Mm-hmm.
until they found out, and then they realized, oh, okay, that's it. So there's always a blush in their face, and they have these goggly eyes. And then I realized, okay, I'm doing something. I
Right.
think I'm doing fine in terms of
Right.
writing. And then that's when I have this urge to publish it, to
Mm-hmm.
collect it into something which is a book. And then
Mm-hmm.
and there comes Ukiyoto, and I am very thankful because of that.
Right. I also think, Kelvin, it's very important for people to write about uncomfortable things, right? Because the things
Yes.
that can be considered as stereotypes or taboo, because once it comes out in art, that's where the conversations begins, right? Like you mentioned, you
Yes.
wrote about abortion. Now, abortion is it's a political statement in the entire world, right? So even right now, if you look at the US, there have been laws that have been preventing women from getting an abortion. And at the same time, our countries are also dealing with our own political environments. So definitely writing in a way that stirs people up is very important. And I really like how, you're making a statement in your own country. So, talking about making a statement, do you only consider poetry to be your calling, or do you also venture into writing short stories or just any other thing?
Uh, Actually, Miss Ishvi, I
Mhm.
used to have this professor that told me that you're not that good in writing prose. So
Okay.
just stick with poetry. So that's his statement. And at least a decade from now, that statement still lingered in my mind. But I think uh, after dissertation, if everything went well smoothly,
Mhm.
I plan to I have this concept inside my head of writing a specific novel.
Mm.
I am fond of reading the Game of Thrones or the Song of Fire and Ice by George R. R. Martin. So
Right.
I think there are still no writer in our country that is particularly fond of writing a medieval like type of story,
Mhm.
focusing in the culture of our country. We have
Right.
this certain epics in
Mhm.
our country that was converted into a TV series, but
Mhm.
there is no up to date up to now, no specific story focusing in a Game of Thrones like a
Right.
story.
Understood.
I have this vision of a novel called Bakunawa.
Mhm.
Bakunawa is like an ancient serpent, and I
Okay.
think there is uh, a similar like creature in your country,
Mhm.
this Bakunawa. And I want to write a no I think I want to write a novel about the datus and the rahas, or the specific chieftains of these barangays in the pre-colonial period
Mhm.
Philippines, and how they're going to deal with the politics while there's a looming threat of this
Mhm.
Bakunawa.
Mhm.
The mythology of our country used to tell us that the Bakunawa, there are seven moons in our in the night sky, and then the Bakunawa ate the six of it. So
Mhm.
to appease the gods and to appease Bakunawa, they are making sacrifices in front of the Bakunawa. It's like the mighty Kulkulkan of the Mexicans or the ancient
Uh,
Mayans and the Aztecs. So
Right.
that's a very visionary plan, but I think I need to finish first my dissertation, because that's my that's my
Right.
goal
I
for now. But I appreciate the fact that you asked me about my future plan. Yes, I want to write that specific novel, but I think when I am not that slave of my job, of my day job, and my postgraduate.
Right. First of all, Kelvin, I mean, that was a very interesting premise for a book. I will definitely be looking forward to it. And I completely disagree with your professor. I am pretty sure you'll be able to nail that because you do your research well, as I can see. And I am definitely looking forward to it. And also, all the very best for your dissertation. I
Thank you,
can
SB.
understand how how tough it can be to manage both your
Yes.
writing and your work. So with that, I would like to conclude this session. But before we leave, could you give some advice to potential budding authors who might want to write in the way that you do?
Yes, I think my advice to potential and budding writers who want to publish his or her own book is, mind your critics, but don't let them get under your skin.
True,
I always believe that authenticity as an individual will always reflect on what we are writing.
true.
And yes, we do have our idols that we look up to. We have
Hmm.
our Hunter S. Thompsons. We have our Ernest Hemingways. We have our George R. R. Martins, and we have our Stephen Kings. But
Yes.
please never let idolatry gets in your way.
Hmm.
Create your own path and discuss something that is relevant now. You don't need to be politically correct, nor you don't need to be a woke person.
Right.
You just need to leave your mark in a context that maybe someday that
Mhm.
certain mark of yours will be discussed and will be a source of discourse to your peers,
Yes.
especially to your readers. I always believe in this, actually, what we call the Van Gogh effect.
Yes.
That even though we died in this lifetime, we with few people appreciating our art, a day will come when someone will unearth our writings and many people will appreciate us. And I am just happy that I published this book of mine. I
Mm-hmm.
thank you very much, Ukiyoto. Thank you, Miss Ishvi, and your team. And my dream is just to have this hardback copy of it and give it to my future kids, so they can
Right.
have this copy to be displayed in our living room. Profiting from it and promoting it, such as now, I consider it secondary, but I do appreciate this moment and this opportunity.
Mhm.
Whenever I go somewhere, I have this pride or sense of pride that I published my book once and for all
Yeah.
after 32 years of existence. So this is it. So this is my rock and roll moment. So thank you very much.
Mr. Kelvin, you are an inspiration to us all. Trust me when I say this. And I loved how interesting this conversation was, because I can see your passion for writing, and it
Yes, thank you.
definitely comes across in your book as well. Even though I cannot, like, I mean, I had to use Google Translate to read your book, but even then I was so affected by your book. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And I'm sure the people who will be watching this are going to be really inspired by you. And I really like your statement that, you need to write. You don't really have to make a political statement, or you don't
Yes.
have to be woke. You just have to leave your mark. And I think that's a perfect closer for our session here today. So thank you so much, Mr. Kelvin, and I definitely hope to see you soon with your next book.
Yes. Thank you very much, Miss Ishvi, and thank you very much, Ukiyoto Publishing. God
Thank you.
bless. Thank you.
All right, bye. Have a great day ahead.